Good evening, everyone. This is Tim Ash, President of the Vermont State Senate. It is May 6th. This is my evening update on Vermont's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And like with some of my previous updates, tonight I'm going to be focusing on learning from people who are truly at the front lines of addressing the COVID-19 crisis, but not the people that you typically see when you're looking at the newsreels, where it's oftentimes focused on physical health and in our hospital settings rather than our mental health settings. For many of us, we believe that physical and mental health should be on equal footing when we think about people's well-being, but we know that historically the stigma attached to mental health challenges and also just the fact that it happens oftentimes privately or confidentially rather than in a hospital or a healthcare clinic makes it a little bit out of sight, out of mind who don't follow this work or have someone immediate in their lives who are affected by particular mental health challenges. So tomorrow I'll be providing a little bit more detail about some of Governor Scott's the restrictions that he eased up slightly today. I've got to digest it a little bit more before I can communicate to the broader world what I make of it. I did talk with him a little bit earlier today, so I'm starting to get an understanding of how this will lead to subsequent activities. But tonight I'm really grateful that I have two guests with me from the Howard Center, Christina Pasnick and Peter Burns. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Christina, is that your dog?
Yeah, this is Russell.
Hi, Russell.
He joins me for health sessions every day.
I'm glad he could join us.
We weren't sure if that was a stuffed animal. We're glad.
Well, you have to ask, right? You don't know if you don't ask.
Yeah, especially in our world of Zoom. Right. So for the audience watching, many people in Northwestern Vermont will know what Howard Center is. It serves people in a variety of ways and in a variety of settings, but both with mental health services, also substance abuse disorder services, amongst a whole variety of other programs. And I'd like maybe both of you just to, before we talk about how COVID has impacted your work, maybe just talk a little bit about what each of you does in the pre-COVID environment so that we can put it alongside the changes that have been necessitated by the shutdown order and all the state of emergency we're in. So Christina, maybe you get us started. Tell us a little bit about what a day in your life normally looks like at Howard.
Sure. So I work for the school services program, which is just one program under the umbrella of the Children, Youth, and Family Services Division within Howard Center. And one thing that I really love about my job is that there really isn't a typical day. There's no, every day is different. And for everybody, it's going to look a little bit different in every school. So what school services does is we have clinicians that are contracted with the school districts. So within each district, there are a number of different schools, and there's usually one clinician to one or two schools working full-time just within that school. So on a typical day, I would go into my office. I work at C.P. Smith School in Burlington, which is one of the elementary schools there. And like I said, every day is a little bit different. So I have individual sessions that I do with kids on my caseload. I do lunch groups and other mental health related groups with kids throughout the school. I support parents in different kinds of meetings. I'll attend IEP meetings and care conferences, transporting kids to different appointments. I'm also a support for teachers and other staff at the school, and I work together with other support staff in school to sort of decide who's going to go on what caseload and, to just kind of troubleshoot and talk about different things that are going on. So a lot of things.
A busy day in the typical day in the life of Christina. Great. Thank you. And Peter, I know you're in a different set of responsibilities at Howard. Tell us a little bit about what your job normally entails.
I work at a group home for people with psychiatric disabilities. We serve 8 people who live there. The house is covered 24 hours a day, although we have somebody who whoever sleeps over at nights is asleep. Some programs have an awake overnight, but we have a sleep overnight. And our group home is, in contrast to Christina's work, there's a very strong daily routine, which includes giving out medications. The people who live there, the residents, do chores every morning. We provide one meal a day right now, although before this happened, we used to cook more. Um, so a typical day would be, if I came in the morning, would be, I describe, would come in, check in with my coworkers, give out medication, check chores that the clients do, cook lunch, maybe go for an outing in the afternoon. That's what a typical day would be like.
Great. So two very different settings, but both addressing really critical needs of people in our community. So now that we know a little bit about what you would be doing pre-COVID, what were there any, I don't want to say warning signs, but Peter, as we saw the virus start to come to the US and we saw outbreaks starting in different states, and we knew we would not be able to, be completely immune from being affected. At what point did you realize that things were going to start, you would have to start changing some of the ways that you serve people in the group home you work at?
Well, the first thing we heard about was quarantines and 14 days that we'd have to spend at the group home, and that was sort of a rumor. That never was actually going to happen. But when our supervisor, basically we had a staff meeting, and our supervisor told us some of the things that we're going to have to change, and there was a lot of uncertainty, a lot of fear. We faced the possibility that we would have someone COVID positive in the house. And if we did, that would change radically the way we operated. As it happens, as far as we know, we don't have anybody who's COVID positive. We still have many precautions in place, but mostly, and I think it was shared by everyone, the sense of alarm, uncertainty, and anxiety about what was coming, because these are people, the clients who work are people who have psychological difficulties to begin with, and depend to a certain degree on the staff to be a steadying influence, although all of us are a little bit loopy as well. But so it was kind of absorbing that extra anxiety as a staff and trying not to let it too strongly affect the people we work with and live with.
I can imagine the extra level of anxiety that it's impossible to not project to others, because we're all human.
Yeah.
And Christina, I'm imagining it was a little different for you. I am still remembering the early days for me as a legislator when we shut down the State House on Friday, March 13th. That weekend, frantic parents were contacting us saying, should we send our kids to school? And of course, the number of students who were attending had already started to drop off as parents tried to be proactive. And then the governor announced that Sunday, I think the 15th, that the schools would be closed effective that Wednesday. So in advance of the governor announcing on Sunday that the schools would close 3 days later, what was the atmosphere like for both you and the students and staff that you work with?
Yeah, so the schools did close officially on March 18th, and before the closure was announced, it was probably about a week before that our staff had an emergency meeting to discuss how are we going to be taking more precautions, what kinds of extra cleaning efforts are going to be made throughout the school. what else were folks going to do to modify their classroom procedures? And we had the school nurse going around and teaching hand washing techniques to all the kids in all the different classrooms. And then it just kind of happened very quickly. And, we had heard on that Sunday that school was going to be closing. Monday, Tuesday, a lot of parents kept their kids home. There were some classes that had only like 1 or 2 students. But then by Tuesday, there were some classes with no students at all. And then by Wednesday, everybody was home.
It seems like a long time ago that people were being encouraged to bump elbows. It's only 2 months ago, but it seems like it was 2 years ago. So Christina, young people are struggling to manage the effects of this on our lives, whether they're someone who has an identified mental health challenge, whether they have an IEP in school or not. But what's it?
Can you tell our listeners what an IEP is?
Well, I'll let Christina.
Yeah.
Christina, I'm the son of a special ed teacher, but I'll let Christina.
So you have to remember those terms don't automatically.
Peter, I'm guilty of something I often accuse others of. Thank you for catching me.
Okay, go ahead.
So an IEP is an individualized education plan. And that is something that is implemented for students that might need extra help in a variety of areas. Our school psychologist would be much more equipped to talk about this, but it's just kind of puts in place a legal document that can follow a kid throughout school that creates a list of things that teachers have to do, accommodations that schools have to make to support kids in their own individual needs, whether it be something academic or social emotional.
Well explained. Now, for the students that you serve and the staff, now that everything is being done remote, I'm assuming. So maybe say a word about how you're having to deliver your services now, and what your take is on what the impact has been to sort of separate the normal relationship you have with technology, serving as a intermediary now.
Yeah, so we've moved to telehealth for as far as like counseling sessions, and I know that outpatient therapists are doing the same thing. We use Zoom, and for school, I know the school district is using Google Meets and Google Classrooms. There's an app called Seesaw that I know a lot of the younger grades are using. So we're doing everything remotely now. What was the other part of your question?
So in light of the fact that you've now got technology as the vehicle to deliver your services, what's been the impact of that on the kids you serve? Does that make it harder to serve them? Are they reacting favorably, unfavorably to having to talk to a computer versus you being right there?
Yeah, and everybody's different. So I think I personally find it's especially hard for the younger kids. There's kind of some novelty in the beginning, like, oh, this is a cool new way to have my meeting with Miss Christina. And now it's been a little bit, after a few weeks have gone by, we're having to get pretty creative about how to keep kids engaged. But then other kids are like kind of the same deal every week, and we've gotten into a routine. And I know that our staff have come up with all kinds of ways to engage with kids. So like a typical day when I'm normally seeing kids at school, they're coming in and I'll have an activity ready for them, something that's related to their treatment goals. And it might be like a worksheet or a book we're going to read together, or a video we're going to watch, or a game we're going to play. And I can still do most of those things. Like we're still reading books together. We're doing art together on the computer. I know that other staff and myself, we've like put together some little art baskets and dropped them off for families. So I was doing origami with some kids yesterday after I dropped off some origami paper. So we're just trying to, the main thing is keeping our connection and keeping the relationship going, and letting kids know that, hey, we're still here to talk to you, and we're still here to talk to your parents. And if you're having a hard time, we can talk about it, and we're here for you. And, giving them the space to express and the space to talk about the things that are on their mind. And it might not be the stressors that they would experience normally in school. There's all kinds of different things that are happening now. So maybe instead of processing the conflict with a peer that they were having at school, now maybe we're talking about like the guy in the video game who's being really mean and how we're going to handle that together. or, just managing family conflict and things that come up for kids that way. Another thing that some of us have been doing, we've started some Google Docs where we can talk, like kind of journal back and forth with kids. And I made some actual physical journals where I put some prompts in there to just kind of keep them, not just keep them busy, but like keep them thinking about their identity and who they are, and looking forward to the future and things that they're going to do after all this is done.
Great. Now, Peter, when you first started talking about the group home you work at, you were saying that in the lead up to COVID-19 arriving in Vermont, there were a lot of rumors or speculation about what might happen if one positive test. It probably would have meant having to evacuate everyone out of there and quarantining and all that. Sounds like you've had good luck with no positive tests at this point. But what's it been like on the clients you serve to have this public health emergency surrounding everybody? And I'm thinking particularly, you described afternoon outings and things, which I'm guessing have been curtailed either completely or substantially. What's it been like on the people you serve, knowing that outside the building walls, there's all these restrictions in place and, risks to public health?
Of course, it varies from person to person. Just as a step backwards, a couple of substantial changes, or one of the most substantial change we made were asked to make, is we used to have a community meeting, a community meal and a community meeting every Tuesday. We passed around a talking stick and we told each other how we were. There was a reading. We took care of some business. As you probably know, no one is completely clear about what causes mental illness, and there is no consensus about what cures it. That's still completely up in the air. So what we do, or what we were able to do, is provide a sense of community, a sense of belonging, a sense of being part of a group of people where there was humor, there was food, there were celebrations, there were birthday parties, stuff that they might not have had access to in other life situations they had been in. And that's been the hardest thing, is we don't eat meals together anymore. We don't have community meetings. As I said, we don't go on outings. So while many of the people who live there had reclusive tendencies to begin with, so they may have spent a lot of time in their room already, we are limited in helping people get out into the community, do things, and be part of both the group home community and the larger community. And I think it's hard to say what the short-term effects of that are, but I don't think that the long-term effects are going to be particularly healthy.
Yeah, I think we're all kind of reckoning with the bit of trauma that's being imposed on society in general.
Right.
A term that many people think of as something that happens to
Right.
kids in abusive households or something like that. But there's something bigger about what's going on here.
And one of the things that you don't know, and you don't know things until they happen to you. But I teach outside of my job. I teach swimming. I teach classes in other areas. I teach classes for local motion. And I'm not doing any of those things anymore virtually. But I come home from work and I'm exhausted. And so and other of my coworkers are, it's almost as if the added stress of this whole situation, while invisible, has real physical and takes a physical and emotional toll on us. Because the group home has its stresses, but it's not to the degree that we're experiencing now.
Yeah, Christina, what's your take when you think about it from your point of view and the students? What might be the enduring effect of this? Maybe not for the rest of their lives or the next 10 years, but in the months ahead, what's your sense of the impacts this is having and what we might need to do to help people kind of get through it and rehabilitate or have a therapeutic environment to get back to a healthy spot?
Yeah, so again, it's going to vary per individual. Everybody's going to manage things a little bit differently. Are you familiar at all with the Adverse Childhood Experiences study?
Yeah,
Yeah, and for folks that aren't, there's a study that's gone on for, I don't know how many decades. Originally, it was like something like 20 or 30 years ago, where there was a list compiled of certain events that might occur in a child's life that will have a lasting impact. And there are things like the death of a parent, substance abuse of a parent, being physically or emotionally or sexually abused. And I had heard recently that this period of isolation, the response to COVID, is going to count as an ACE score for kids that are growing up in this time. And I think that makes a lot of sense, because the isolation that we're faced with right now, the way that things are going to change, I'm thinking ahead, like going back to school after 6 months of being out of school, and then going back to see your friends and your teachers. And I think there's just going to be so many different responses. I think there might be some kids that don't understand why they had to not be in school. They might be angry with teachers and with us. And there might be a lot of explaining about like why that had to happen. And also about safety. We've told kids like school isn't safe right now. This is why everybody has to be at home. And then explaining again, okay, now school is safe, so we can come back. That could be a really confusing message. And I think that families and kids are going to need a lot of support when we are returning from this, to talk about that safety piece and rebuild some relationships that have been put on hold.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about what it would be like to be a student now, whether you're a senior in college or you're going into first grade, and returning in the fall, but not knowing if you'll get sent home again.
Yep. And there's a very real sense of loss as well. Like I've talked to kids that they're missing them with the elementary age kids, but I'm thinking about the older kids that are missing their graduation and missing some of those milestones that they have been looking forward to with their friends and their families for years. And then other kids they're missing their baseball season. They're not sure if they're going to get to go to summer camp. They're not, getting to see family members and friends that live further away. So it's very real loss that people are having to cope with.
I've talked to the governor directly about trying to figure out how to pull down resources to help support kids easing back into school. I think for many people, they think, oh, well, let's just cross our fingers, hope there's no positive tests in the summer, and then everything will just be back to normal. But kids have lost this period of time for a lot of that, especially at the younger ages, for academic growth and advancement. And there's going to be a lot of transition challenges. I've got time for a couple more questions for both of you. Peter, you talked a little bit about how exhausted you feel coming home from work. In part, it sounds like you don't have all the other releases and things that give you joy outside of work. What's it been like amongst some of the other people who you work with, just in general? I say that because, I really do feel strongly that people who work in mental health should be held right up alongside those who work in physical health. But I don't think that our society really appreciates the two-tier, nature of well-being that we have. What's it like on the front lines? You have to show up, in an in-person job.
Yeah.
What's it been like on your coworkers?
Well, we are incredibly blessed in that we've been together for 17 years, which in a group home is almost unheard of. Howard Center continues to face the challenge of turnover and, those kinds of things. So we know each other pretty well, and we're able to sort of have a give and take and be flexible. One of my coworkers texted me yesterday after I came home from work and said, sorry, I was crabby today. Things have been challenging. So we all, we know it's hard work. We know it's stressful, but we are a close-knit group who feels good about the work we do. And but you can see, we're all a little crazier than we used to be. Crazy in quotes. We're a little crazier than we used to be, and things that might not have stressed us out quite so much do. Just coming into work and having to take your temperature every every morning, wearing masks when you give out medication and gloves. There's a dehumanizing quality about that. And, I was thinking about Christina's students and the fact that, here we are virtually, but we're all physical beings. We're all bodies. And the fact that we can't be together and connected physically with the community we're used to be part of is really hard. And it's going to have an effect, and we don't know what it is yet.
That's well put. Christina, how about with your peers? How is the changed circumstances, the changed way of having to both deliver services, but also confront the challenges this poses in our own personal lives? How have you been observing your coworkers' ability to kind of get through this and continue to provide the level of care they usually do?
Yeah, my coworkers are amazing. My supervision is fantastic. Our supervisors are available to us to, kind of help problem solve on a day-to-day basis. I can just send a text and I get a reply immediately, maybe not, getting a phone call right that moment, but we're able to be there to support each other on a daily basis. And then as far as my colleagues at school, teachers are doing an amazing job right now. It's Teacher Appreciation Week, by the way, and they're all going above and beyond to meet needs for kids. Some teachers who had never used a video chat service in their lives had to kind of overnight learn how to use Google Classrooms and Seesaw and all of these different apps, and not just learn them, but become experts so that they could then teach parents how to do these things. So that I think people are just working so hard right now, and we're constantly having meetings and sharing with each other appreciation and doing check-ins and giving people some space to just talk to each other and be there for each other. One thing that our school has done, our guidance counselor and school psychologist and myself have been creating, we're using restorative practices, and it's a big thing we've been doing in the Burlington School District, kind of an approach to problem solving and relationship building. And we've created a virtual circle that we do every Friday, and any staff member from the school can join, and we all just kind of talk and create different questions to get each other thinking about what's going on in our lives. And it's just a nice outlet for everybody in our school.
Great. Well, before we wrap, I'd love to hear if either of you have any reflection at this point. We're 2 months into this crisis, and at this point, wondering if there's anything looking back so far that stands out as a particularly positive moment where you observed something, that really reflected, the best of your coworkers or the best of the people you served. And why don't I start with you, Christina?
Sure. Yeah, what I was just saying about teachers just kind of going above and beyond. Also, our paraeducators are doing an amazing job of being there to support our kiddos. There are people in our community that are doing daycare for essential workers right now, which, it's not something that's normally part of their routine or something that they would typically do as part of their job, but they're doing that and helping. It takes a village, and we're all kind of helping each other out. Yeah.
No, that's great. How about you, Peter?
I think of this situation where I work alone on Sunday nights, and it's a long shift, and one of our clients came in inebriated, and I gave this person a breathalyzer test without forgetting to put a mask on, which is all this stuff is so new, and I was really anxious about it, and I thought, oh no, I made a terrible mistake. And I called up the supervisor who was on at that time, and she was just so supportive, and she said, I'm so sorry you had to go through that. Where I thought I would be, at least, if not reprimanded, at least said, you gotta have to be more careful in that. Rather than that happening, I just received a lot of support and sympathy, and I'm grateful for that. We on the front lines can't do the work without the support of our supervisors and the whole agency.
Well, great to also hear that she was concerned about your well-being in addition to
But
letting
you
you
know,
off the hook. The
right,
actual concern that both of you would be okay.
right,
Well,
and it nothing came of it. It was a minor thing, and this person is not positive, and but when things happen and you just react, and then afterwards you think, oh, I can't believe I did that. Supervisors can either say, yeah, you're right, you did mess up, which was true to a degree, but but this supervisor was very sympathetic, and really, I felt a lot of support in that situation, and check with our doctor on call, so we covered our bases in terms of the actual situation, but the most important thing I remember was that sympathy,
no, it's
because
very,
yeah,
it's
we
totally,
remember how people make us feel, I think, right?
no, it's a great way to end our discussion tonight. So Christina Pasnick and Peter Burns, I just want to say how much on behalf of the Senate, we appreciate all you're doing. You have peers throughout the state working for your partner agencies, many people working at Howard, some of them in-person services, some of them having to switch to remote, but all doing really critical work. And as I said, for people watching, it's in the legislature, sometimes we talk about mental health parity, and that means different things depending on who you talk to. But what it really means is that there's a lot to our well-being, and it's not just whether, we're keeping our body weight, at the right amount, but our mental health and mental health well-being is really critical. And so you're looking at two people who help make sure that people are living full, healthy, safe lives. And so we totally thank you guys for what you're doing. And I'd say keep it up. I hope you don't have to keep up this type of work for too much longer, because I'd love for things to
Yeah,
slowly return to normal.
right.
But we have a lot of confidence knowing you guys are out there. So thanks so much. And for everybody who's been watching at home, thank you. And if you have the ability, this would be a great time to lend some financial support to the Howard Center or any of the other agencies around the state who perform the type of services they do. None of the people who work at Howard Center do it to get rich. Otherwise, they would be making a big mistake, because it's not a line of work that lends itself to 7-digit salaries. And so anything you can do to help support them goes a long way, both for morale building, but also to support the organizations themselves. So I'll be back tomorrow at 5:30 to talk with some educators from Winooski and a student, and also talk a little bit about the governor's executive order today. Otherwise, stay safe, and I'll see you tomorrow.